to tonight's meeting.
Oh, am I using the wrong one?
Oh, no, hang on.
Thank you.
Welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council, being held in the Civic Centre, our temporary meeting location that allows for appropriate social distancing. Welcome to those viewing via live stream, and I remind them that the agenda can be located on the Council's website. Firstly, a reminder that the usual meeting etiquette and protocols apply in addition to mandated procedural meeting requirements. You'll be able to see the minutes in progress on your individual screens via the Zoom link sent to you today. We'll also be using show of hands to indicate your desire to withdraw an item to gain my attention to speak. I ask you to raise your hand high so that I can see it for voting as well. Our CEO will support me in identifying the order of speaking and to ensure fairness and equity for all. It will be appreciated by all here and those viewing at home that you speak clearly, only when asked or required to do so, remembering that your comments and remarks may be heard when you are not officially debating. Please show appropriate etiquette and respect for each speaker. I think you all know where the toilets are, so I won't do a reminder, but in the case of a fire or any other emergency, you will be asked to follow instructions from council staff. And before we begin, I ask you to turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent. Please now stand for the opening acknowledgements. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Thank you. Please be seated. And there are no apologies. Any notification of conflicts of interest by elected members?
Oh,
Councillor Davey?
thank you, Your Worship. I have an interest in the construction works matter, my motion on notice. I don't have a conflict, but I have an interest in that I'm having a house built next door to me. And the other matter is in terms of the Burnside Hospital. I have an interest, but not a conflict. I had surgery there earlier this year.
Thank you. No leave of absence. Confirmation of minutes. I seek a mover. Thank you, Councillor Henschke. Seconded, Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Carried. There are no deputations or petitions, and public question time, as you know, is temporarily suspended. So questions on notice have been answered or people have received and earlier this evening. And we now get to item 10, motions on notice, and that is yours, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Worship. I'll read the motion out for those at home.
Councillor Davey, I've just had some people say that they often can't hear you. Can you hold your paper up rather than talking down at your desk? Because I think that might actually help projecting to the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My motion is that Council schedule an information elected member workshop to be held on or before 12th of November 2020 to inform elected members about how a more systematic construction site management can be implemented in the City of Burnside. And 2, that following the provision of information, Council develop an appropriate policy for systematic management of the residential or business locale around the development. The objective of this proposal is to establish what tools or legislation are available to Council to improve the amenity of residential and business occupiers living and operating adjacent to and in the vicinity of a demolition, building and renovation work, for its duration by proactively considering and planning for the construction activity around the site, and which addresses issues such as, but is not limited to, the following: street traffic management, road closures, goods delivery and contractor parking, environmental matters, the rights of neighbours when problems arise, waste management, noise control, emissions control, access to on-site utilities such as water and electrical, communication with neighbours, litter control and site tidiness, and maintenance of site perimeter fencing and safety and security. So the reason I've moved this motion is because of frustration, nuisance, traffic management problems being experienced from construction activity across the city of Burnside at its interface with the business and residential community. I have experienced, and many of my constituents have contacted me to say that they think this is largely under control and that we, council, need to manage it more effectively. This is not a criticism of the administration, who in many ways must operate within the constraints of the Development Act. As I said previously, I acknowledge my interests, but I don't believe I have a conflict, as I have a large home under construction next to my property at the moment. And in speaking to the motion, no one objects to development. It's part of life in the 21st century. Our state government policy settings are designed to facilitate it, and there's a strong desire to live in the city of Burnside. Real estate here is very valuable, as is the lifestyle that we're fortunate to experience in Burnside. So many want to build their homes and live here. However, I believe it's now out of balance, with many subdivisions approved, many million-dollar homes now being built to replace smaller homes. There's extensive renovation of many homes, and we have schools, aged care facilities, a hospital, and shopping centres, for example, all expanding. The construction of these places means there's a huge strain on our community and our infrastructure. To start with, on our roads and streets, particularly our small secondary feeder streets, on our environment with damaged street trees, verges and other green assets, and such things as building waste runoff into stormwater. We have noise and dust generated, which is controlled to varying degrees, depending on knowledge of the quality of the tradies. Visual pollution is a problem, as large buildings often cover the whole site, leaving very little room for storage of all the timber, steel, bricks, sand, the toilet, the rubbish skip, etc. on site. And then there is the traffic generated to access the site. The large excavators for the demolition, often trying to scrape down small streets, damaging trees all the way. The delivery trucks and cranes with girders, timber, steel, precast concrete. There's the concrete pour, which can involve as many as a dozen trucks rotating through past the site to pour stuff, all queued along the road, while residents are trying to get in and out of their homes and live their lives. And then worst of all, there may also be a generator fitted on a trailer parked on the street with jerry cans of petrol or diesel stored on the verge and belching fumes with cords trailed across the footpath, because the owner won't allow tradies to access the electric power which has already been undergrounded on site. So as you can see, I'm sure you're all aware of these problems. Your constituents have probably raised them with you. We receive considerable council revenue, as has been highlighted in the questions tonight. I think $500,000 per annum in development in Burnside. And I think we need to invest a better part of this in representing our existing community to coexist, so that there's a better coexistence between the life that's already being lived in the residential and business areas and the works that are proceeding. So I think this is possible, but I think there needs to be an intervention to actually make this happen. So that's why I've asked that we workshop this together, get some information from experts to see what's possible in a technical sense, and develop and implement a better system in Burnside. so we can all get on and live together. Thank you.
Councillor Davis, you've indicated you'd like to second, and then Councillor Hugel has also wishes to speak.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to support Councillor Davies' motion. In fact, on the weekend, I went for a walk and there was a property at 25 Yaltana Street along the walk, and I noticed that there were Besser blocks over the footpath. There were milk crates on a Sunday. There was corrugated, the reinforced Rio steel that was placed over the footpath. It essentially made it unnavigable. They even had fences from that front area that was lying across as well. So as a pedestrian, Avril needed to walk on the road to try and get around this particular footpath. And having seen Councillor Davies' motion, I took a photo and sent it to her. And I think that many of us are confronted by the way in which developers go about their business, and they do it, in my view, in very problematic ways. And when residents raise those concerns, I'm not always sure what they can and can't do or what can be enforced. So Councillor Davies, raised a new one that I've never heard about before, is a generator being on a road, then being used to power the development site, having those, having the fumes and having the cords going into the site itself across the council footpath. And I think it seems to me that some developers are becoming more and more aggressive in terms of what they do, and also the reinstatement of the footpath afterwards. So what I was hoping, I think we can discuss this. First of all, I'd like to understand more fully what it is that council can do. Can a ranger go through and fine for certain things? What can a developer do and what can't they do when they're constructing? And particularly, how can council then, I suppose, develop even a policy or something that they can provide to a development application and say, these are all the things you can't do. So that if a ranger does get called out and they say, oh, we didn't know we're not allowed to park in front of people's driveways and across their verges and all this stuff, and you can say, no, well, you weren't provided with this information and these are the rules for normal development. But I think it is something that we need to look at as a council, because it seems, to my mind, to be happening more and more, and there seems to be more and more disregard for the safety of pedestrians and also for the amenity of the area as time goes on, it would seem. So I'm more than happy to support Councillor Davies' motion. I think it would be good to develop a policy or at least an information document, one for residents and two potentially for developers, that they can be given to say, well, these are the rules, these are your requirements, and then they can be put on notice about it. And so when a resident does call up, they can say, well, you're not allowed to run power cables over it, or you need to reinstate the footpath, or you can't leave your fences strewn around the place and onto the road. And what appropriate action they should take in those circumstances, whether it's been to contact a council officer. And in many cases as well, the schools, a lot of them are undergoing huge development. And I think that potentially, whilst Woods actually probably hit the end of it, when those large construction or those large projects also commence, this was also be relevant there. So what can a resident do if a truck has been parked outside of their house and it's been turned on the whole time and it's vibrating their property? Or what happens if construction starts before 7 a.m? What are the rules? And I think that would be beneficial for us as councillors, but more importantly, that we can provide to our residents to support them. So that's why I support the motion. I thank Councillor Davies for bringing it.
Councillor Hugel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I have a potential suggestion that Councillor Davies may take on, but also the CEO might be able to maybe just incorporate it onto what's going on. I think this is great motion, very much in support of it. I would like to include in that some sort of perspective around the monitoring of development complying with what's actually been approved. And a lot of comments I've had from residents is they weren't, the scope of the works that end up occurring are actually outside the scope of what's actually approved. And once it's built, well, it's built. There's not much to do, and you just think, well, along the way, if there are some checks and balances that we might be able to throw in there. So I'll leave it out there, just for contemplation there. Look, I think reading through the community feedback in the strategic plan, that it just kept coming up and up again. A feeling that the community wants us to justify actions that are happening under our watch, be them our responsibility or not. And I think anything, even if it's outside of its scope, I think if it's possible to keep our finger on the pulse of things, and it doesn't interfere too much with operations, and funding, of course, is a big issue here, then it's certainly worth doing. So it's very worthwhile.
I just asked the CEO in relation to your question you raised. Perhaps he'd like to answer. I wondered if it might be incorporated already in number 1. So
Yeah.
I'll let him answer.
I'm happy to include it now.
Through Madam Mayor, I would see certainly incorporated in part 1 as part of that workshop. I'm sure that would be part of the information that we share with elected members as part of that. So I'm comfortable that it's already inclusive in that information.
If somebody wants it more specific than that, then
I can add and monitoring after how more systematic construction, site management and monitoring can be implemented in City of
you happy
Burnside.
with that, Councillor Davis, seconder?
Sure.
All right. I'll incorporate that extra word. Monitoring off, yeah. No? Okay, the next person on the list is Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I spent a year on the council assessment panel, and I certainly learned a lot about development applications, submissions from residents, and certainly the approval process. And like Councillor Lemon, who's very familiar with these things, there's a lot of legislation already in place addressing all of these aspects that we're hearing about tonight. Unfortunately, it's about education and compliance. On that point, I do think, though, this motion is duplicating existing legislation. And for simplification, we, as a council, are better placed to be educating our builders and residents that want to develop properties, raise their awareness of the requirements. For example, that you don't cut down a street tree to enter a property for construction, which I have seen examples on Gurney Road. Grandview Road, I should say, Grandview Road, and which I have raised awareness with the council and who have written a letter to the developer and have said you will be prosecuted, but of course there's no proof unless someone took a photograph of that particular tree being trimmed. So it's a very difficult area to police, it's a very difficult area to control, but what we can do is educate. So I propose that on item 2, instead of us duplicating the existing systems that are in place, that following the workshop, that we develop not a policy, but a guideline, a pro forma, construction management plans, whatever we need. Guidelines, pro formas, so that developers and builders can prepare their construction management plans and submit those with their development applications if necessary. Some developments require excavation work, and that creates a lot of disturbance in a street, even though it's a small project. So I wish to amend the motion to read an appropriate.
So you're wanting to make a formal amendment to the motion?
Yes,
Moving that.
moving a formal amendment.
Because this could be covered in the workshop and then become an extension from the workshop.
Yes,
Is all I'm suggesting, but I'm
but
not going to stop you from running your
okay,
amendment if that's what you wish.
right. It's just that item 2 does specifically refer to an appropriate policy.
Would you see that amendment consistent?
Councillor Henschke's type of amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to amend
It's
the
not inconsistent
word,
with what we've got there.
instead of council develop an appropriate policy, that council develop appropriate guidelines for the management of residential or business locale around the development, or a policy or a guideline for developers and builders.
So through Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
There's two approaches here. One, if the mover is comfortable with the change of the word policy to guidelines. If that's not the case, then we continue with a formal amendment.
I just think that
I'm only going to listen to Councillor Davey. who's
I
amended to
can't
this.
see the wording, sorry.
So if I could just sorry.
Yes, we've got no connection.
If I can clarify, in part 2 of your motion, you are suggesting that council develop an appropriate policy. Councillor Henschke is suggesting that that word policy will be substituted with the word guideline instead of policy. So if you were comfortable, you could treat that as a variation. If you weren't comfortable, we'll treat it as an amendment and run the amendment.
I'd be happy to say accept policy and guideline. Would that be reasonable?
policy
Well,
or guideline.
Could be adding all guidelines.
I can I have a question to the administration through the mayor. If the intent is education of builders and developers, would that be better through a guideline or a policy or both? Does it, my point being, existing legislation and the framework we have currently covers all these aspects.
Through Madam Mayor, I think without preempting the outcomes of the workshop, we need to be careful because a lot of these areas already have a legislative position in the state or federal governments. My preference would be for a guideline. So I'm not sure that the policy would be in the true sense of the word, a policy position of council.
Thank you.
So how do you respond to that, Councillor Davey? Are you happy to just change the word policy to guidelines, and then from that, there could be that a policy is developed anyway? If that's because we're going to workshop it.
Yes, if this, are you happy with that?
Councillor Davis, Davis, are you okay with that?
Okay.
All right, so change the word policy to guidelines, and doesn't require an amendment motion, which is just an adjustment to the existing.
Yeah.
Right. Is that all you wish to say?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so next person is Councillor Lemons.
Thank you. I actually think they are very separate things, guidelines and policies. And I think that what you're looking at is developers and builders. And I think what Councillor David is looking at are subcontractors. And what we don't have is any controls over subcontractors. And I think that's the issue here. So I'll just relate what's happened in my ward over the last couple of years. You get major builders, well-known bulk builders that are at work in our city, and they generally comply to all legislation because they're big outfits and they can't afford not to. The problem is boutique builders and sole operators. And what I've had in my area on Olinga Avenue in the last, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, a sole builder who actually bought a corner block, knocked down a house and built two-storey houses there instead. The neighbours immediately next door to that were under siege for over a year because this sole operator didn't know that you're not allowed to start at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And he and his subcontractors were there every Sunday for 8 months. These neighbours had no respite from them until they called me, and then I had the Rangers phone number. And we actually battered this builder over a period of 6 weeks, and I would actually go there and do a trip to that particular site every Sunday. And I was incensed the day I saw that this builder had closed off the road. Didn't ask us, just decided to close off the road that Sunday because it suited him. We do need a policy for those sorts of people. We don't need a policy for big end builders that know what they can and can't do. And we need to have a policy that nips it in the bud at the time, not just an education campaign, because this man was a bully and he bullied the neighbours. He traipsed into their yard. It was a boundary to boundary development and never made good. The garden, the paving, the broken down pipes, never, ever. Not good enough. And I thank you for this motion. I'd actually like another dot point in here if you'd like.
I'm happy to put some.
And that is asbestos. Because whilst there is legislation about asbestos, I have no confidence that people like that lone builder will actually comply with the legislation. So the neighbours then would not only be under siege 7 days a week from 7 o'clock in the morning, they may well be breathing in stuff and their children that will kill them early, because people like that don't pay attention. So a guideline isn't enough. You need a policy, you need something to whack them with. And I think it's really important that we do that. This is different to compliance. Compliance is another issue in terms of building a house where it's supposed to be built, as opposed to siting it on a different part of the block, which we've had in Burnside before, sited a metre away and a metre higher, just so the views of Adelaide can actually be looked at. That's a different issue. But this actually could give us, because we don't go to every build and check, the neighbours can do it for us in a lot of ways. If they feel, if we actually are neighbour friendly when it comes to building development, and the neighbours feel that they can ring us up or go to our website and see what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, we might be alerted to when builders actually don't do what they should be doing, or are actually building in a different spot. That carport has been put on council land, and we can intervene before it's a done deal and we end up with a retrospective application that we then have to approve, because where does it leave you? So I think there's much that can be done with this, and it's very timely in the sense that whilst the code isn't going to actually come into effect this month, when you get private certifiers as well involved in this, I actually think we even more need to rely on our neighbours to make sure that those people that are making large profits from empty bits of our land or where they've knocked places down do in fact comply with what is right and proper and neighbourly in our neighbourhood. I'm done.
Councillor David, did you want to add asbestos removal to the list?
No, before that, and I thank Councillor Lemon for her point, I want to clarify whether builders covers subcontractors as well. Because I thought builders were the ones responsible for the work, were the principals on site, and then the subbies were subordinate to them in terms of their contract. Is that how it works?
Yeah. If I can, through that, Mayor, if I can clarify my mind, what I'm hearing, the issue here is essentially how people are conducting themselves on building sites. And so I don't think it particularly matters at this point whether it's the builder or the subcontractor. This is about how we can provide mechanisms to deal with both those matters. So I think in our actions, we need to be aware of both those nuances. So I think, in my mind, this is covered.
And therefore, the issue of asbestos then would be, I mean, that's actually managed by the state government, Safe Work SA. Do we have control over that sort of toxic matter?
Through Madam Mayor, you're quite correct. You know, there's existing legislation that covers asbestos and how it should be handled. I think what we're talking about here is what's the mechanism for the neighbours or people that become aware of what they feel is perhaps an unsafe practice. How do they bring that to our attention? Because we certainly do have a role if we see something that's not being complied with to inform the relevant authorities that will deal with that if it's not necessarily us. So I think I'm comfortable with having listed here just so that in our workshop we can talk about how we can manage that situation.
Councillor Turnbull, you were next on my list.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions really to start with. What happens now when somebody complains to the council what happens? Does council come and check who does it? Who's responsible for checking if there is a complaint? Is it always complaint driven, or do they do spot checks?
Krista, answer
I
that
suppose I'm
one
asking administration. Yeah.
And Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Kent, Mr. Cooper, sorry.
Thank you for the question through the Mayor. We do building inspections in accordance with our building inspection policy, so that it's not every single building that site that takes place, but we do them to meet the quota under the policy, but we just don't have the resources to check every single one.
So basically it's complaint driven, I guess.
Yes, we will certainly investigate all complaints, but in terms of those that built and we don't get complaints, we just will inspect those to meet the quota under the policy.
Last question is, have there been instances where building sites have been closed down for non-compliance?
Through the chair, yes, there have, but it's because of building safety issues under building compliance, not necessarily because of some of the issues that have been highlighted in the motion.
So I'll just like to say, I'll support this motion too. I suspect it's an area we don't know much about as councillors, so a workshop would be interesting and informative. I'll certainly support that motion. Thank you.
Councillor Piggott, you're next.
Yeah, I've got a question too, if I could. I'd like to understand what of these things are actually in our jurisdiction. What of these things do we have any control over as such, as local government, as opposed to others?
Through the Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Cooper.
Through the Mayor.
Through the Mayor.
That's better.
The matters referred to in the motion are either managed under legislation, which is different to the Development Act. The matters that are raised in the motion tonight are either managed under legislation, which is different from the Development Act, or are not within the jurisdiction of the council. So if I just look at the items that are within our jurisdiction, if you think of it, I'll just go through the list: street traffic management, road closures. Generally, road closures and additional parking restrictions are inappropriate. And what council has a role in there is making sure that all of the regulations under the Australian road rules are complied with. And upon complaints from nearby residents, we will attend and manage those issues. So we do have some control in those. Environmental matters, it talks about tree protection, verge protection. Parking and stockpiling on verges is not permitted and can be policed by the rangers. This does, to a certain degree, ensure that trees are protected during developments. Dust is subject to the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act, and drag out of mud, which is another common issue, is controlled under the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act. The rights of neighbours where problems arise, that's really outside of our jurisdiction completely. These are often civil matters, so really our only role there will be to provide advice on particular issues and give those residents some advice on how to deal with those, but completely outside of council's jurisdiction. Noise control is again under the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act. Emissions control certainly is, but access to utilities on site is not part of council's jurisdictions at all. That's obviously up to SA Water and SAPN to provide those connections. So again, we can advise, but we can't actually do anything else about those. Communications with neighbours, again, that's not part of council's jurisdiction. Again, civil in nature if there's any issues that occur, and in particular any issues with fences, there's the Fences Act that deals with that. Access and litter control and waste management. To a certain degree, we do have some jurisdiction now under the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act. Finally, the maintenance of site perimeter fencing, again, that's not something within our control. That's purely up to the practice by the builder doing that development. So you can see that there's a mixture of things, some that we do have jurisdiction over and others that we don't. So what we're suggesting there is that that's where we can play that education role to advise residents and builders what they need to do.
So on that, could I ask a second question? What do we currently do in the education space? It does seem that a lot of this is ready to go. It's not working based on what we're hearing tonight. But what are we currently doing to inform builders and contractors?
Through the Mayor. We do provide standard advisory notes to our developers on the approvals. So those notes remind them and alert the applicants of the requirements under other legislation. So the notes, for example, include things like rules around new driveways, the protection of street trees, the dog before you dig program, relocation and planting of trees, any heritage places, Aboriginal artefacts, building work affecting other land, subterranean work that is, notifications relating to swimming pools, asbestos removal, demolition, and various nuisances under the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act.
Right. When you say that's an advisory note, is it just plain print on A4 piece of paper?
That's correct, yeah.
Right. Okay. Perhaps no pictures.
So do you wish to speak, Councillor?
Could look, I have a sort of a contrary view. I certainly don't dismiss the issue. I guess issues between neighbours, it's always frustrating me how little power we have as council to sort out disgruntled neighbours. It's I remember starting years, whatever it was ago, and all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I thought, oh, we could sort a few long-standing neighbour rows out, just waltz in, mediate, bring council to the table. It doesn't work like that. It does, and so I do worry about us having a workshop to try and sort of workshop this, because I feel the tools available are already there. It strikes me that it is perhaps the communication of them and how hard we're pushing on them could be improved, and having residents more clear to them what they can do when they are disgruntled. But I do worry about us having a workshop where it covers a lot of stuff that is already in existence. In actual fact, it strikes me that probably what we should be asking for is a real attention of how well we are getting this in the faces of people developing on their land, and making sure that they are addressing those issues. So I don't see it as something that involves all of us. I think it is a problem we've brought to the table. Thank you for that. But I do see it as something that's already in existence. We really just need to, administration needs to tell us how they're going to work it, perhaps better than what is currently happening, which I don't see really requires, certainly doesn't require a policy. I don't think it requires a workshop either. I think it requires some time being put in to actually get that word out in a more aggressive, for want of a better word, way to the people building in Burnside.
Councillor Dawes, you were next.
Yes, I'm going to try. No, I'm not going to take it off. I can hear myself reverberating in the headphones. Councillor Turnbull told me today I should be the expert with this particular issue, because on my short, narrow street, I have 3 builds. One been going for 14 months, one for 12, and one, which is a smaller one, for a couple of months. So I do understand the issues. Parking on the nature strip, breaking pipes and irrigation on nature strip, working before 7 a.m. and work weekdays, even working on a Sunday. I've always thought that education and communication is the key. I heard education from Councillor Hinsky and communication. But what I want to make the point is that it's not just guidelines for the developers, it's also guidelines for the residents. So I like that to be included, because they need to know who to call, how do they actually resolve. Now we had one resident last year, had a very difficult build. He started off so well, because he just built his own house. and he called in his neighbour. They had a cup of coffee to discuss the build and worked out how they're going to communicate. Lo and behold, that was the last time that they actually spoke, despite his efforts. So you had your road subcontractors, as Councillor Lemon has said, and the building supervisor for the house had to always try to intervene to find a solution. So I do understand what the problems are. I know our jurisdiction is limited here, as Councillor Pickett has mentioned, but I do want to make the point that the guidelines need to include separate ones for developers and also for residents. I'm a little bit with Councillor Pickett, I'm not sure if we need a workshop, but I'm happy to go and listen because I might learn a lot more from that. But the thing that residents say is because council has approved the development, why hasn't it taken on more of a compliance supervision control of that development? That's what it comes to. So you've approved it, but look what's happened. So I think there is something here on the guidelines, not a policy. I like the idea of guidelines. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon, you had a question?
I do. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, but have councils taken the role of EPA to a degree? I believe they did last year in terms of noise control and other things. It was a devolving from state government to councils.
Through Madam Mayor, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Does that include noise control?
Yes, it does.
So why is it different for somebody building a house? Noise control is noise control.
Through Madam Mayor, I think the distinction we're making was that they're managing it under separate legislation that's already exists. We wouldn't necessarily need our own policy to drive our approach to that because we're already acting under existing legislation.
So can I ask one final question? Of this list, how much of that would be under the purview of EPA that we've taken over from state government?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll take advice from Mr. Cooper.
Through the mayor, basically all of the issues.
All of traffic management.
Sorry, I'll start again. Through the mayor, basically everything that's associated with or could be classified as a local nuisance. So that does cover things like fumes, noise, dust, drag out, all of those issues, litter.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, you're next.
No, I was just going to ask a question, but I think it's been answered.
That's been answered, okay. Then it's Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the motion as it stands. I'd like to see the workshop. I do wonder whether or not we're not going hard enough. Perhaps we need a bylaw so we can actually do our own finding in this area and actually show some leadership for the state. I've experienced two sets of builds. You get the builds that happen fast, where you get lots and lots of subcontractors and the streets are chock-a-block for 100 metres on either side of the house, full of trailers, trucks and all sorts delivering. But the house is done quickly. It's like ripping the Band-Aid off in the street and life goes back to normal. And I've also experienced houses where their owner builder and they take 10 years. And I've got complaints from residents for both. The one, when will this building ever be finished? And the other one, completely, that I've lost all my amenity in the area. So I think it's something we need to explore and look into, and I'm happy to do that through a workshop and possibly some guidelines. I've mentioned to the CEO multiple times, specifically around trees, that communication is massively the key here in development. We had the issue with trees getting chopped down on the weekend and no one available to confirm whether or not they've been approved. all it would take would actually be a sign in front of the property that's actually authorised by the city representatives and marked off, and maybe, you know, there could be a barcode that people can scan with their phone and takes them to the website where the actual approval is actually signed off. And that's all it would be, because communication with our residents is the key, that this thing has actually got approval. So, you know, whether or not it is a sign, I know the new Act actually has a sign, it's built into the Act that they actually have to promote what the new build will look like, and a lot more detail on it. And I really am supportive of that measure that obviously we went through that consultation within planning reforms. But I certainly think there's something that we can look into in this area, and I'm happily support the motion as it stands.
Right, I haven't anyone else on my list. If you're all right, I shall go back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your input, which reflects the challenges we're facing and our community is facing. We do need to put a proactive system in place. We need some proactive measures to ensure that our residents and our community can maintain their amenity when there's all this construction work going on, as with businesses too who are affected. Builders need to have their responsibility, builders and subcontractors, and I take that point, need to have their responsibilities reinforced. And I love the idea of the possibility of a bylaw. I think that would be fantastic. But the other key is that we must be able to give our residents and our community more information about their rights and who to contact, and so that they know that there can be a quick response to their concerns, and that they won't just be told, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. We need to actively help a lot more. We've got overlap with a lot of the other legislation, as I cited in the motion on notice. But we just have to start managing the traffic better. People just have to be able to get through to access their homes and egress them, get out of them safely. We're also sustaining lots of damage to our street trees. I've just seen it where an excavator just brazenly moved down a narrow street and just tore down huge branches from 4 trees. And we're also sustaining lots of damage to our verges and our other pipes and infrastructure. So I think this will help, and it certainly will be a start, but I'd like to see us being much more proactive. So hopefully you'll support this.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now, 10.2, Councillor Turnbull. Sorry, yes.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'm moving a motion of decision of Council Resolution C12647, the 25th of August 2020, with respect to the proposed Park Run event. In moving this, I believe that the decision may have been made without full consideration of some factors impacting on, or soon to be impacting on, in Kensington Gardens Reserve. There's already a very great execution of works about to happen in Kensington Garden Reserve, with major works in the southeast corner, new paths and new fitness stations around the reserve. The full impact of all these works, both in the development period and the long term, are not known. Therefore, it does not seem to be an appropriate time to be attempting to try things such as a car park survey or a community consultation and expect to receive valid or meaningful results. I believe that if we are to proceed with these reports, they should be undertaken after the redevelopment, after it's been completed, when the impacts of these on traffic, parking and the use of the reserve are settled and known. To proceed would incur considerable costs, $7,000 to set up the park run if the event gets up, about $7,000 for consultation, engagement costs, marketing, postage, survey, etc., plus staff time, labour time and associated costs, collating information, report drafting and editing, etc. This money and time would tie up council time and yet not provide us with any useful information. This money could be used more prudently to keep up the necessities for our residents in these times, especially since council income has dropped by $450,000 so far due to COVID. The consultation is already causing concern to some residents. Remember the deputations, the angst, especially for those adjacent to Kensington Garden Reserve, when discussions about the wheel park were underway. The potential impact of the parking, the noise, cars parking early Saturday morning, doors banging, people greeting each other, The loss of the natural ambience has been discussed before, but it is really true and really relevant. And it is good to create an activity for people outside of Burnside, but our priority at the moment, at this time, should be to provide for our own community with our existing resources and financially responsible manner. Also note that at the meeting of 25th of August, did not seem to be a clear consensus in favour of the motion. It was first lost, then after a call for a division, eventually passed 6-5 with one councillor absent. I believe that this motion requires a rethink until after the developments have occurred. So I ask for your support for the motion to be rescinded.
Seconded, councillor Cabo?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Happy to second this rescission motion. Generally speaking, I don't like rescission motions. They're often political and they drag on issues. But I think in this situation, I do have to say I think we got it wrong, and I think we need to reconsider and give more thought to the issue at hand. I'm happy to obviously second this motion, but my rationale actually is a little different from what Councillor Turnbull's already mentioned, apart from a couple at the end there. And as I said at the last meeting, even though some were not here, I've got three main reasons that I think we need to reconsider it, three main reasons that I think we got it wrong, okay? And the first one is that we heard very clearly from the two ward councillors about a year ago arguing against any more work in the Kensington Gardens Reserve. That was very clear. Words to the effect of it was full. They didn't say that, but it was words to the effect of. No more room, no more space, it was at capacity, it was full, no more room, all that kind of stuff. It was very clear. We all heard that and we all accepted that. So that was the first one. The second one is I have a very strong concern about us playing favourites. And this, I think, is council playing favourites. We are telling one sector of our community that no, they can't have something in the Kensington Gardens Reserve, but we can have another sector in the community and tell them that we can have something in the Kensington Gardens Reserve. And that's disgusting. That is playing favourites. I don't want to use the word, we'll leave it at that, okay? But that is just so wrong. That is just so wrong. We've got one group that is talking about 30 children coming along on a Saturday morning and so forth, and we tell them no. And then we've got one group that's going to have 300 adults, and we're telling them yes. So am I just the only one here that thinks that is just wrong? How are we going to explain to the Will Park community why they couldn't get their facility in Kensington Gardens Reserve when someone else could? How are we supposed to explain that? And the last thing, which Councillor Turnbull already mentioned, and that is I don't think there was certainty. This is a very controversial matter, and I think we need to be absolutely certain about what we're going to do. No doubt whatsoever. And I was very upset about how the vote went last time, and I expressed this. So I think it was treated poorly, and I think there were one elected member who treated this, who was very flippant on the issue, where they voted yes, and then 2 seconds later they voted no.
Who was flippant?
Okay?
State their name.
So that is poor. If you're the ward councillor promoting this big issue, you need to be very clear about what your position is. You can't change it halfway through the vote.
Who was flippant?
So there's only 2 ways out of this that I can see. Because if we do go ahead with this park run fiasco, I think we owe it to the Will Park community to say, you know what? I think we got it wrong, and I think a rescission motion is on the table. Otherwise, we vote it down and we go with what ward council said, and the park is full, end of story, and that's it.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I find in many of these issues, we have a lot of people who speak from different points of view, and I think that that's one of the most valuable things from our council. And we have a lot of different perspectives, and I think at the end of the day, we often come to the right decision. You know, some people think from their hearts, some people think from their heads, and I think some people think from their appendices. I mean, considering some of the comments that Councillor Carbone has made, he's disgusted. He's disgusted about the debate and the decision that was made for a run in the park. That's what he's disgusted about. And he's thinking that we're playing favourites. And the emotional language and the diatribe that comes from some councillors on this issue is just completely over the top. Now, the idea, and the whole tenor of Councillor Carbone's vote, or the reason why he wanted to vote, is because it's a misrepresentation of the debate we had. And it's a complete misrepresentation of what the residents came here, gave deputations on, and wrote to us about it. The residents had a number of issues. I can tell you why, in terms of why these two things are different. Residents were primarily concerned with 1,000 square metres of concrete being put into a reserve that was largely a sporting precinct, and was about the erosion of open space and about the installation of about 1,000 square metres of concrete. Secondly, I had the concern that if it was to proceed in terms of a skate park, it wouldn't meet the needs of what the skating community had wanted. Now, this council has voted on that, and that was primarily the basis of why it was voted down. In my view, in addition, the Kensington Gardens Reserve is highly utilised, and it is an incredibly busy and active reserve, and that's why we go and do this consultation. That's why we go and have a look at the traffic, and that's why we go and look at it. But the fact is that Kensington Gardens Reserve, in my view, is not suitable for 1,000 square metres of concrete, and that's primarily the thing. I think to say that it's disgusting, to say that all the residents came here and said that, it's really unfortunate, because it's trying to engage an emotional response from you rather than using your heads. So coming back to the park run, I've gone out to my community, and I've written to them, and I've written to them about park run in particular. And I asked for their feedback before I put this motion to this council. And I said, what do you think? And I had a couple of people who were against it. They were concerned about the traffic. And I had a lot of people actually who came forward and they said to me, that's great, I'd love to do it, and I'd love to be engaged in it. And it was local residents, and they said, and they thought, they came to that their own volition, they said, I could walk there and participate in it, and it is a community event for that area. And a lot of people were highly interested in that kind of idea. And that's why I brought it to this chamber. And I think that, I thank Councillor Turnbull for her view on it and her input into Kensington Gardens Reserve and the way that she's considered this issue, and also representing the views of residents, that maybe she has spoken to. But I think that that's the whole point of a consultation, is it not? That you actually go and you find out what they actually say about it. You go and do the traffic study, and you actually find out what it is. And you actually talk with facts and you see whether it's possible. Kensington Gardens Reserve is never going to be a premium park run facility. And I think Councillor Turnbull she said that we were providing a facility for other people. Well, it is really primarily a facility for our own residents. And having spoken with the sporting clubs as well, they would also incorporate that in terms of their training facility. Their kids could come earlier, they could participate in the sports, the park run, and then go about their sport and use that as part of their fitness regime. And I think that's highly beneficial. Most importantly, though, is that rescission motions, I think, should be voted against unless there's new information. Now, to my mind, you could run a rescission motion every time you don't like the outcome, and we'd be here every single time talking about rehashing a motion, whether someone's here or not. But to my mind, council makes a decision, we should be clear on it. And last time, council made a decision, clear decision, to proceed with the report and proceed with the officer's recommendation in terms of continuing it further. So I won't be voting for the rescission, as there isn't any new information. Council has made this decision. We've been going through this, and I think we should see it through. And we shouldn't just presume to know what residents think. Let's ask them. Let's pay that respect. Let's give them that respect and see what they think. And then we'll be in a position to make an informed choice. And I don't know what that will say. And I'll make my vote, whether we proceed or not, based on that information. So I hope that you vote against this motion, and we continue with the officer's recommendation from last meeting.
Councillor Pickett.
Thank you. Councillor Carbone started off saying that decision motions are generally quite political, and then spent the next 5 minutes making it quite political. And as a result, I feel I have to defend myself. And I think the argument between the skate park and the park run is pretty clear cut. Councillor Davis mentioned the 1,000 square metres of permanent infrastructure going into what is a very green park was certainly an issue. And the other issue was really it was available 24/7. So residents were actually are concerned by the potential for a skate park, the fact that it could be actively used all the time. What we're talking about, the park run is once a week. And also, I think, so moving to the park run, I think, so I am comfortable that actually it is consistent. I may actually, with consultation, it may come back and the exact same response has come from the people who are Kingston Gardens Reserve. But I think we should see. The park run, the arguments against the park run, I think the fact that it's not necessary for the people of Burnside, I've always railed against that argument for we just shouldn't be, I don't think we should discuss it, to be honest. We're putting things in that are good for people in Burnside and they can access them. If people outside the city of Burnside come into the city of Burnside to enjoy them, then so be it and good luck to them. And let's face it, they do it with just about all of our major assets in reality. And I think that's a purpose we serve. The main issue will be the parking. There's no question. It's only a short term. We are getting the benefit, the good fortune of getting decent paths being put into that park in the upgrade, and this will allow them to be used at least once a week for their meant purpose and be available for everybody else for the rest of the week. The issue will be whether the place can cope with the amount of people who park. And it was interesting, the original one, which I felt actually the big issue for mine. Cricket may push it because of the junior cricket programs that are done on a Saturday morning. But I was interested by the numbers that came back from the rugby season work. The fact that it did show up at that time of day, quite a reasonable capacity for it to be able to take it. So I do think at the end of the day, whether it's political or not, I do feel it's a slight square up from Councillor Turnbull. I know she was upset by Councillor Davis and I shared her upset. And I sort of feel that's feeding through to this as well. They are political decision motions. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote against it. However, if you look at the facts of it, I think we did get the decision right. I think it does have enough merit to actually go the next step and see what the people around think about it, see whether we could cope with it in cricket season without derailing the parking around the place. And if so, then it would have my support. So I don't support the decision either.
Councillor Lemon? No. You don't wish to speak now? Then Councillor Henchkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm not upset about Councillor Davis at all. It's nice. And
That's a change.
I'm never upset with Councillor Davis. Really, I'll never. It's great. So, sorry, but my point is that, yeah, Councillor Davis, thank you. You did say we need more information. And when we got the agenda, I gathered some more information about this. And once I got that information, I thought, I feel we need to stage this project. It's a great project, Kensington Gardens Reserve, with all its aspects. And I'd really like to pause. I'd like it to be constructed, implemented, see it run, and then have a park run after that. After we've just settled, let the dust settle literally, after we've done the excavation, let the dust settle, then just revisit this. Because I think we're just going a bit too fast, because we're going to be spending quite a bit really. My information is that this next this motion that we're talking about rescinding is in fact going to cost us as a council, and I'll just get the information up exactly. Yeah, so we knew that was $7,000 for the parkrun event. And then we know that it's going to be costing about $5,000 on engagement-related costs, marketing, collateral, postage across the city for this consultation process. And plus it's going to cost about another $7,000 for staff. And so look, we're coming up to $20,000. And that's the data I got from that's data that I've been emailed. And so that's my position. I'll support this motion. I really think from a project perspective, staging projects is a good idea, especially in these difficult times.
Councillor Davey, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a question. Unfortunately, I wasn't here last week to hear the debate.
Get to hear it again.
Previous occasions.
And again next week.
Word for word. It's another meeting.
My question is, when would it be that the consultation would be undertaken? Would that be later in the summer? I'm not quite okay with the stages.
Yep. Through Madam Mayor, in the resolution that we're talking about this evening, it actually points out, so we're looking to undertake the car park survey during the upcoming 2021 cricket tennis season. So it's looking, I guess, at the time where we think there might be a peak of usage to understand the impacts on the reserve at that point, so we get a more accurate reflection of the impacts on parking.
And a follow-up question.
Consultation take place.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, my mistake. I misunderstood the question. I'm going to refer that to Mr. Kent.
Yeah, through your worship, we were planning on doing the consultation in November, roughly at the same time that we would do the car parking analysis.
Did you wish to speak, Councillor Davey?
I'm still thinking.
Holding on for a moment. Okay, just a question. Then it's Councillor Cornish next, and then Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Worship. The cost of the actual parkrun event seems to be coming up a lot here tonight. And I'm looking at the actual motion that we passed that we're being asked to rescind. And not once does it say that we're signing up to parkrun there. Not once. We're just asking the local community over there, do you want a parkrun? Do you think the actual park can handle a parkrun? That's what that motion was. That's what we're asking to say, no, we don't want to consult you. We don't want to do anything for you guys in the area. And I've got a bit of an issue with that, I have to say. You know, we spend a lot of money on consultation, and $7,000 does not seem a huge sum to me in the scheme of all the consultation that this city does, or the reports that this city asks for. So cost is not an issue for this one for me. There are just 2 surveys that we're being asked to the administration to run out and roll out, and we're asking for a report back. And only then would we actually go, oh, well, we've just spent $800,000 on building this brand new walking path and cycling path around the place. Could a parkrun actually utilise that? That's what we'll be doing later on. And that will be a year away. I have no issue with this motion. I don't understand why this is coming back to us. You know, there's no development happening. We're not building, you know, 1,000 square metres of concrete. We've already agreed to the actual pathway that's already being installed no matter what. I don't understand why this is an issue, consulting local residents about whether or not the park can accommodate people walking and running, which it currently does. I don't understand it. I won't support it as it stands. It just seems a bit ridiculous to me. And for the cost, it just seems minor compared to what we spend on other things. So I won't be supporting this rescission.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I had a question. The cost. Does the cost actually cover the car park survey and the consultation?
Through Madam Mayor, just through Mr. Kent.
Yeah, that's correct. That covers all elements of that council resolution. We estimated it to be approximately $4,000 plus staff time.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. First, I have a question. One of my constituents has phoned me who actually lives in Kensington Park and has actually asked how he wants to have a say in the consultation. How extensive will the community consultation be? I'm a bit worried if it's $7,000 figure. Is that going to be a widespread whole of council consultation, or just the residents and the dress circle around the park?
Okay.
Through your worship, we were intending on hosting the survey to the surrounding suburbs of Kensington Gardens Reserve itself. I think it was 3 suburbs directly affected, but anyone citywide can also be involved in responding to the survey via the normal platforms, through Engage Burnside, the website, etc. Thank you.
I'll speak then if I may. I am torn between this because I do have some considerations about the capability, perhaps the oversubscription of the park with all of the work that's proposed in the park. And I do have concerns that a park run event on top of that will be really overloading the park. But as it's clear, decision motion, when you have someone ring you and say they want to have their say, and so the communities, I would imagine, is keen to have their say. I'm sorry I can't support this. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week to hear it all, but thank you anyway for putting it up.
Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak very briefly. There's some good points that have been raised. I guess I don't see this as a skate park versus a running track issue. This to me is really just about the best use of council time and funding at this point. And I think, we had the debate last week around this. My personal view is that if this was driven by a community group who were coming to us and say, this is something that we want to own as the City of Burnside, then I would be more inclined to support the park run. But I have been to park runs before and seen the large volume of volunteers that are required to run these types of events. And I feel that given that it really, the success of these events is really driven by having the community on board before it even starts. In fact, most of these events are initiated by a group of volunteers who then would perhaps come to council, or they would actually go and find their own funding from a sponsor in the local community to then fund this and get it happening, essentially to seek council approval for rubber stamps, say, can we hold an event in your city? So for me, I guess it's not about let's go out and survey the community, because sometimes if you ask me, oh, would you like to do this? I say, great idea, love to be involved. If you then said, would you be interested in committing for the next year to rock up every morning at Saturday at 8 o'clock and volunteer and run the event, you might actually get a different response from people in the community. So I think going out and asking everyone, would you like a park run? You might actually get a different answer to, would you actually like to own a park run within the City of Burnside? Because that's actually what I think needs to happen for this to be successful. And although I appreciate what Councillor Cornish is saying, that we're not actually being asked to vote at this point in time on a park run, I actually just think we as a council get to make a decision about what we move forward with and what we don't. And we don't have to consult the community on everything that we do. So for me, I think this is really just a decision around my personal view of, do I think that we need a park run in the City of Burnside? Do I think that there's the volunteer base there knocking at our door who are going to own this, because it shouldn't sit on council to own these types of events? And for me, that's really the basis for making my decision tonight. I appreciate that the whole politics of a rescission motion, and I don't think we want to be doing this every week, because, dear Lord, if we have to come back every time and debate issues twice, I think we'd see people quite frustrated with the whole process. But I do think we ended up last time perhaps not seeing the passion in the chamber around this actual decision. We did get to a vote that was kind of, oh, well, and then a final decision was made based on a division being called. So I don't have an issue with it coming back on that basis. And I just think we, as a council, we all need to decide how, do we need to consult the community on every single thing or every idea that comes up? And no, as council, we have the opportunity to say, I don't actually think we need to do this at this moment in time. And that's essentially why I'll be voting in favour of the rescission motion.
Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be using any emotional language. I'll just be saying how I feel about it. I did vote for this last week, but I do accept that we could revisit it for the reasons that have been explained tonight. I do sense that the community activations in the reserve will increase as a result of this development. Over $3 million worth of development. It doesn't have to be sport, it could be passive recreation and so forth, but what's happening in the creek. So how will this affect the park run concept? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm a little bit different from Councillor Hughes. I think this is one issue where I would seek community consultation. However, I did feel that the mover of the original motion last time was unsure. He wasn't confident that the residents would support the concept at this time. So I'm happy to wait until the development occurs, which is going to take us, I think, 12 to 18 months, not too sure how long, Mr. CEO. But then we have a better understanding of how this reserve is being used, because there will be new running paths. There are some now, but they're not at a very good standard. So I think what you might find is that we're going to get a better result from consulting our residents in, say, 12 months' time. So I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Councillor Henchy, a question?
Yes, a question to the administration. If we built when we build the track around Kensington Garden Reserve, would that consultation could be somewhat different, where we would say to the community, we've got this track and this is, go and have a look at it. Would you like to do a park run on there? Or maybe residents might get interested in the track, and as Councillor Hughes said, it'd be driven from the community where the idea would come from them. Is that a logistical possibility from the administration's point of view?
Through that, Mayor, I think honestly it's a time issue. So if council doesn't have this debate until the track is completed, it would depend whether someone has come forward from the community to us to consider that. Because if that doesn't occur, it would be a conversation council is having in that we would effectively be seeking as a council community groups to run an event rather than considering a request from them. So I can't give you a straight answer. It will depend on the timing of the situation when we get there.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't so clear in my question either. Thank you.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Levin, I think you got your hand just ahead of Councillor Hughes.
No? Yeah,
No, Councillor Levin, you were slightly ahead.
Thank you.
Then it's Councillor Hughes.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but I feel that I must, because a lot has been made of things changing when a division was called, and that clouded the decision that was made. And I would say this: the division was called by Councillor Carbone. The division is as political, in my opinion, as bringing a rescission motion. And divisions are called to make people stand up. And divisions are called specifically to make people change their minds, often. I've been here long enough to see that happen in both cases. So, to say that it was an MC decision is misrepresenting what actually happened. Council makes a decision. And a motion is either won, carried, or it is lost. And in the particular case, at our last meeting, the motion was carried. It wasn't lost and then carried, it was carried. The division was called and the motion was carried. There is no disputing that. It was carried. End of story. So to talk about then there being an odd, neither here nor there response is to misrepresent what actually happened. The motion was carried. And that is the point that I would make. I'd also make a point about misrepresenting what we're actually looking at here tonight. What we're looking at here tonight is a consultation. What's been said is that we could do it in 12 months' time. Why would we? Why not do it now? And in actual fact, I'm very interested in the car park survey. And I'm very interested in that car park survey right now in November, because we're looking at refurbishing some of the clubs. We're looking at putting in a heap of infrastructure. And I, for one, would like to have a car park survey before the end of this year, because I actually think that gives us a very good benchmark about whether that is in fact overused or not. We don't know. We're going to do a survey as part of this. It's going to actually take up half the cost of the consultation. I think this is worthy money spent now. So for that reason, and for all the other political machinations that have come around this tonight, I will not be supporting this rescission motion.
Councillor Hibble.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have left speaking right up until the end because I did want to hear the debate. And my reading of the debate is that it's largely been a list of reasons not to go to consultation. We haven't been talking about the issue of the merits of the parkrun as an event and the benefits it may or may not bring to the city of Burnside. We're talking minutiae of detail and skirting around the main issues. I think this has merit. Why anyone would oppose such a positive community event, which will get people outdoors, promote healthy living. These people will then stay within the city and spend money at local businesses on coffee and brunch. This is a proven event worldwide. The parkrun community are behind this. Yes, there haven't been, a plethora of copy and paste emails on this. That does not mean that the running community does not want this. Works that are underway have been approved by locals. They like it. These include a running track that will bring more people to the reserve. This was something that the locals wanted. This is an undertaking for people in our community, so our residents do not have to travel outside city boundaries to participate in parkrun. There is no... I just cannot stomach that the argument is being made. We should say no to this because we said no to something else, which at its core is what is being argued by some people in here. The opposition to the Will Park is not relevant. This is a different activity. This is a different demographic. There is different infrastructure at play here. This is apples and oranges. There is no new information since last council meeting. For me, we are revisiting a decision that some people didn't like, so they're asking, let's debate it and do it again. A parkrun is a positive thing. It is something we should have within our city. And it is something that is worthwhile pursuing. And I certainly hope this rescission motion does not get up so that we can go about the business of providing quality events and services for our residents.
Right, it goes back to, unless there's anyone else to speak, it goes back to Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Deb. In summarising, look, I didn't do this lightly. And when Councillor Davis said it was clear, it wasn't clear last week. It was 6-5, then it was 5-6. I mainly did it because there seemed to be some hesitation with some people. And so I thought, okay, let's revisit it. I know we've done all this before, but we really need to wait till the impact of the new developments has been seen by everybody and how it's used with the park. This is a park that has, on Saturday mornings, we have with junior and senior cricket in the summer, junior and senior football in the winter, junior and senior tennis matches, both lawn and hardcourt. We have tennis coaching, dog walkers, people walkers, joggers, bike riders, playground users, and later on bowls. What have I admitted? There must be something because it's a very utilised park. And I'm not saying don't have it. I'm saying let's consider it again later. Not now, not a suitable time, not until the impacts of the current developments are known. And then revisit it. And it'd be a very good idea if there's a track there already. It may come up. But at the moment, I think that we should not go ahead with this because we really need to see the impact of the new developments. We need to see how it affects the parking, the people, the things, the overutilisation. And really, administration and staff time could be spent on other council issues at this stage. Perhaps later, but not now. So I ask you to support me on rescinding the motion. And I realise that rescinding motions is very unpopular. And unfortunately, I haven't been here long enough to work out the intricacies of the calling division. I thought it meant, you know, everybody stood up if you voted for, sat down if you voted against. I didn't realise there was some subtle thing about it all there. So I apologise for that, but I still think we should wait before we go ahead with this. Thank you.
Right, those in favour? Six. Those against? Six. 1, 2.
Division.
Yeah, I have a casting vote, and the way I'm going to vote is based on the fact that I do support fitness and activity. I do support the concept of a park run. I don't, however, consider that it is necessary for us to make a decision right now. I really am keen to see what the impacts are of the development in the southeastern corner that could bring in hundreds of people every week at different times of the day, not all at once on a Saturday morning for 1 hour. I do take Councillor Hubbell's point about the potential of people bringing into the community and spending money, but that's not the experience in Campbelltown with their park run. I am very keen for us to do such a consultation, but not, I don't believe, until maybe 2 years' time, when everything is finished, when the park run is established, when the sporting clubs have made what use they have already made of it. They may choose on a Saturday morning to have a team building activity every week at that time. Who gets the priority? I just believe that we should wait. This is not a rescission motion as often rescission motions are, and that is to stop something from happening altogether. This is just putting a hold on it and saying, let's stop, let's wait and do it again, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years' time. But the essence of this motion is after things have settled, we're bringing in lots of people for that corner, we're bringing in lots of people.
It rescinds the motion. It doesn't say that this is a delay.
It's all in the rationale.
The motion.
It's all in the rationale that supports the motion.
But that's not the motion we're voting.
Excuse me, but you don't need to argue with me anyway. You can have your different point of view. You've had your debate. I'm having my point of view to justify why I am supporting this motion. Right, we will move.
Division.
Therefore, the motion is carried.
Division.
So the division has been called. That's fine. Those people who have supported it. Oh, so do you want me to read them?
Yeah.
Councillor Haskey, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Dawes, and Councillor Jones, and Councillor Enderby. Thank you. Motion's carried. We move on to 13.1. The appointment of the independent member to the city. No, I'm going to go back. Sorry, apologies. We'll go back and see who wishes to withdraw. Office of the, so questions without notice. Are there any? Yes?
Yeah, I've got one. Councillor Turnbull, sorry, that's all right. I've got to move on, sorry. Councillor Henschke raised the issue of Alexandra Avenue trees last week when we were debating the carbon offset motion that was on the table. And on Saturday, there was noted in the advertiser that also referenced the management of Alexandra Avenue trees, as I read it, referred to our arborists as tree murderers. And my question is, what is the situation with the Alexandra Avenue management or management of trees there? I was involved with I think the current policies production some years ago. And I'd just like to know, what is the criteria to take elm trees out of Alexandra Avenue?
I'll refer that to Mr. Chant.
Through your worship, it's essentially a tree regeneration program. Instead of taking out all of the trees at the same time, that would have a massive impact on the environment. Council since 2011 has been doing an annual program to replace those trees. Criteria was set by council in 2011 that set the reasons as to why and when a tree will be removed and then replaced. And that included that they'll be replaced when they die or when suffering significant structural defect that detracts from the overall amenity of the area. This was then further referenced in the site or area conservation management plan, which was considered by council in 2018 and is available on the website. The process is that each year a qualified arborist will assess all of the trees to see if any of them have died or are structurally in jeopardy or unsafe. And then recommendations are made only at that time on whether they should be replaced, removed and replaced. Of those that required development approval, and there were 5 in total this year, and 3 required development approval. So we seek development approval before we proceed with the replacement. As much as possible, we put as mature a replacement tree in as possible to minimise the impact of the visual loss, but to then continue the avenue on us for future generations.
Thank you. I haven't had too many questions without notice. Does that answer getting the minutes? Is there a way of getting that answer in the minutes?
Not unless you move a motion to do so.
Could I do that?
Yes, you may.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion, Rob, we're going to put that the results of the question go into the minutes. And so it was moved by Councillor Piggott,
So
seconded by Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question was a summary of what the current policy is in regard to
Alexandra
trees in
Avenue
Alexandra
trees.
Avenue and Prescott Terrace, I suppose.
Yeah. So what is
And
happening?
the answer was long and comprehensive.
Yes. Those in favour of it being admitted? Against? Carried. Right, the next one is motions without notice. I haven't received any, so I'll be moving on to the reports of officers. Ask you if you wish to withdraw any of these for debate. First one is 13.1, the appointment of the independent member of the City of Burnside Audit Committee. Anyone wish to withdraw it? Failing that, I'll seek a mover. You moving? Yep. Councillor Henschke moved, Councillor Cornish seconded. Those in favour? Carried. Proposed council audit, internal audit plan. Anyone wish to withdraw that for debate?
Yes.
Councillor Davey, you do?
Yes.
War Memorial Lease, 13.3. Lemon. City of Burnside Strategic Community Plan, Councillor Davey. Okay, we'll go through those first. Councillor Davey.
I'm happy to move in accordance with the recommendation. I just had a couple of questions.
Can you speak up, please?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I'm happy to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation. I just have a couple of questions. One relates to the resourcing, the audit plan. On page 32, it says that we'll be using at para 20, the audit plan is to be delivered through the engagement of external specialist resources. How, what will those be and what will they cost?
Through there, if I can hand it over to Mr. Cooper.
Through the chair, the engagement of the external specialist resources refers to Galpins, who are our internal auditors.
Oh,
Cost.
also the cost.
Sorry. Apologies. Apologies. The microphone is now working. Okay, in terms of the cost, we're looking at $60,000, and this is already included in our budget for the year.
Thank you. And the final question relates to page 39, and it's about the customer request system. When is that likely to be, that review likely to be undertaken? Sorry.
Through Madam Mayor, so it's in the financial year 2021, but I don't know if Mr. Cooper has a more definitive time within that year.
Through the chair, no, that will be determined after the plans adopted this evening.
And finally, will elected members be involved in that review?
Through Madam Mayor, it's not normal practice for elected members to be involved. It's an internal audit of our current systems, and they would come back with recommendations and deficiencies were found.
Any further questions, Councillor Davies? Seconder? Councillor Cornish? Now you have a question, Councillor Henschke?
Yes, through the Mayor, regarding the gardens, the Tonga Gardens, does the, page number
Please.
80?
You're in the wrong.
I've got that.
Okay, sorry, I was.
That's, yeah, that's one, that's the next one. So is there anyone else who has a question? Back to you, Councillor Davey then.
No, I'm happy to.
Happy? Okay, I've got the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, now we're to Councillor Lemon, Burnside Memorial Release.
Thank you. I move the officer's recommendation. I pulled this specifically because I wanted to express my delight that one of the people that was consulted, of the, I think 57 people that returned the questionnaires, was equally unhappy about the lack of a commercial lease and unhappy about the fact that it was a very, very low rate of the lease, as I am.
Second is mine.
No, it wasn't that. There's another person, there's two.
There's two people.
List.
And
Councillor
Harvey,
Davies?
three. How many residents are there in Sydney, Council?
45,000, but you know, sometimes three are more important.
Can we move on with the debate, please? Councillor, you're interrupting Councillor Davey, who has the right to speak if she wishes.
I'm very happy to support the motion. I too note the comments that were made, but I'm also very pleased to note that this is a very highly valued community asset, and that the community supported the extended lease. It's interesting to see the comments, but in terms of overall value, this is a very highly valued community asset. It's wonderfully valued, and there's very strong support from the community. The consultation process showed nearly 84% support for the new long-term lease proposed. So I believe we should support this. I'm very pleased that 100 Gardens will not be affected in any way and that the hospital footprint will be minimally affected. So I think this will be a minimal impact to the community. I, in fact, and I'll register my interest in this matter, certainly don't have a conflict, but I was actually treated at the hospital earlier this year for breast cancer in their very highly valued breast cancer treatment centre. Their surgery is wonderful. And in terms of our community, many people in our community have their babies there, they have their cataracts fixed, they have their hips and knees replaced, they undergo their colonoscopies and other diagnostic tests, and I can personally recommend them. So hopefully everyone else will support this. I think it's our wonderful community asset. They need a bit of help, but I think our community is behind them and I think we should support them too.
Councillor Cornish, you had your hand up next.
I did, thank you, Your Worship, and it was because of Councillor Lemon's comments that I couldn't resist having a little bit of a go. I support the motion as it stands. I don't think there is a need for a commercial level of lease for this facility. The hospital built the facility itself, so it's the lease over the land, which is a lot cheaper than some schools pay for lease for a lot larger property in the city of Burnside that have exclusive use over that during school times. If we do want to do a commercial lease, why don't we convert the land from community to operational so that it gives the hospital a bit more assurance rather than them having to go out to consultation every time they actually want a lease. So I'm happy to entertain that idea from Councillor Lemon if some of the other things change, but I will support the motion as it stands.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, just to counteract the negativity from those two people and Councillor Jones. One of the comments said it was a jewel in the crown of Burnside and it provides an excellent service, integral part of the community, credit to council. So clearly it reflects very well on all the elected members here. So all of them.
Councillor Piggott?
I cannot resist.
Of course.
I do apologise.
You
I
started
cannot
this.
resist.
Well, I'll speak again.
I was just taken really, there seems to be a split really on this issue between, perhaps a division, to use a council term, between those who have served on board hospital and those who haven't.
Who wish they had. Sorry.
I too feel the lease is a disappointing result overall. So just to maintain that. Thank you for your indulgence, Lady Mayor.
Other councillor Piggott, yeah.
I just want to say it should never be a debate about between those who've served on it and those who haven't. But those who've actually experienced time in that hospital, I think those are the ones who really can say whether or not it's a good hospital.
I never said I've
but I
not
think
experienced time.
the other comment I just want to make is that they went through a serious problem time too during COVID. They struggled when there was no elective surgery going on. So they have had a struggle during the last 6-8 months as every other business in Burnside has. And we're very lucky that that hospital is still working, is still operating, because that same issue affected all private hospitals in the state. So that was a major issue that hopefully is now somewhat resolved, but we will move on. And is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Hedgely.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say thank you to the administration for the excellent consultation result, and I've noted that the descendants of the Von Reben family even responded, which is just really very, very special. Now the gardens in the lease are not included, which is fine. And my question is, the lease itself, the gardens are part of City of Burnside gardens, and I just wanted to check that the lease doesn't prohibit the City of Burnside from holding events, for example, in the gardens to activate those gardens. So the community actually use the gardens, perhaps not just for the occasional walkthrough, because it doesn't seem to lend itself to passage by the residents so much. It seems like the gardens are part of the hospital and you don't walk in there because that's the hospital grounds. So I get that sense from the community that it's an amazing heritage garden. That's somewhat, unclear. Is this a City of Burnside garden? There's no signage saying, welcome to Victoria Historic Gardens. It looks like it's very much part of the hospital. So my question is, can we raise awareness of these gardens for the use of the community? Whether or not we have a playground in there one day, I don't know. That's another thought. And then the other question I had is, can we reinvest this rent that we've received from the Burnside Hospital into the garden? It is a heritage garden. I noticed, yes, it does get maintained, but can it be reviewed, and perhaps we can raise the level of investment in that garden so that it does actually, we do actually achieve the intent of the bequest, which is to maintain the garden beds and the particular plantings, which are all quite unique, rare, palm trees. And, some of the palm trees haven't been maintained, they're dead at the top. So it can become a heritage garden that the Botanic Gardens of South Australia would be absolutely showcasing if it was theirs. Because at the moment, from I'm not an expert gardener, but it possibly could be have further investment in it, especially from the rent that we receive directly from the hospital.
Through Madam Mayor, so to answer the first part of your question, so it's not part of the lease, clear. So as per the diagram on page 60, the lease area is quite clearly defined. With regards to changing the service levels, that's probably a conversation we could have at next budget. Council was of a mind, but I'd be reticent to change our approach now, considering that budget has been locked in for this coming financial year.
So what about the botanical garden? A few more questions.
Hang on, I've got a question next here.
Oh,
There's a
still
question
answering.
there. If you wish to ask a question, put your hand up and I'll give you the opportunity after the other two.
No, I'm saying you still continue to answer Councillor Henschke's question.
Okay, sorry.
So through Madam Mayor,
I apologise.
sorry for
Bring it back.
I thought you'd finished.
being remiss and not answering the third part of the question. My second response does relate to that to look at substantially upgrading the gardens is a change in service level. And I would encourage council, if they were of a mind, to have that debate on next budget cycle, rather than consider it out of a budget cycle when the funds and our budgets are set this coming financial year.
Can I just ask a question for the sake of the new members? At what point, and I'm sure Mr. Cant can ask that, when did the Tangle Gardens come back to our responsibility? When did we gain the lease on that property? Do you remember how many years ago it was? Was it 3? 4 years?
Like the end of last term.
3 or Shep, approximately 3 or 4
About
years
3
ago.
or 4 years. So just that might help understand where the history of it is.
Thank you.
Okay, now the next person to speak is Councillor Jones, then Councillor Davey, and then Councillor Davis.
Look, I'm sure it's a lovely hospital.
It's beautiful.
It may be one of the jewels in the crown of Burnside, but that's not the point, is it? Because I could say Burnside Village is a lovely shopping centre. It's a jewel in the crown of Burnside, but nobody is proposing that we give the Cohen Group free rates or highly discounted rates.
More than 1 jewel.
This hospital is not doing what it was set up to do, to be a community hospital for the residents of Burnside. I bet you that Councillor Davey did not get a discount or free treatment because she comes from Burnside. It is a commercial hospital. It might be not for profit, but the doctors who work there are still driving around in brand new Maseratis because they're getting very, very cheap rent from the City of Burnside. So really, I mean, this is, I mean, I'm sure this will go through, And I'm sure everyone will ignore the fact that this is a gigantic land grab of all this yellow stuff on the map on page 60, of why the public being denied access to what they previously had access to. But really, I mean, they should be paying a commercial rent. It's a commercial enterprise. So I will be voting against the motion.
Now, councillor Davey, you have a question?
Yes, I just had a question in relation to the garden. Is it not so that there's a management plan in place for the Hunger Gardens that was put in place, I think, when we assumed control of them?
Yes.
And is it not true that the council has made a significant investment in the upgrade and review and refurbishment of the Hunger Gardens?
Through Mayor or further, Mr. Kent?
Through your worship, that's correct. The Atonic Gardens Management Plan has been in place for a number of years now. It was originally part of the hospital's lease that they were to maintain it in accordance with the management plan. Since council has taken responsibility back for the gardens, we certainly manage in accordance with that council approved plan. We spend a reasonably significant amount of money each year maintaining those gardens, and in my opinion, they have certainly improved in the last 4 or 5 years.
Our next person is councillor Davis.
I have a question on page 60, councillor Jones referred to it. The hospital is dramatically expanding its footprint to those yellow areas. How much would the value if we were to lease the yellow portions of that map be? How many extra funds could we achieve from
that? Through the Mayor, I have to take that on notice.
Yeah.
Having said that,
It's rhetorical.
Secondly, a second question is that how did Burnside come to have this plot of land?
You know the answer to that.
You know the answer to heaps of things you want.
No, I don't.
Well, some people are clearly confused, and I think it would be helpful for the debate to understand why it is that Burnside has come into this land, how it holds it.
As opposed to Burnside.
As opposed to Burnside Village.
through the Mayor, Mr. Kent.
Second.
Through your worship, and I'm summarising here. I believe it was the Otto van Rieben and his family that donated the house and land to council as a initially a hospital for returned servicemen and women, and that it remain a hospital for the Burnside community.
And can I just clarify that it was never established for only to benefit Burnside residents, but the Burnside Warm Water Hospital was for returned servicemen and the local community. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Cool. Good.
Councillor Davis, and now it's Cornish.
I'll question your worship because I have spoken on this item already. And for those who were never on the board, could the administration actually answer how many doctors the hospital actually employs?
Through the Mayor. I don't know how many doctors, but the number of staff is around 400.
Zero doctors.
Doesn't employ.
They're not allowed to have a doctor on
Those who
staff.
drive the Maseratis may come there to
specialists.
Yeah.
do surgery and therefore pay the hospital for the use of the surgery, or some of them may rent space within the building. There's not a lot of space for rent in that building. A few offices in the front, that's all.
It must be the
For your
nurses.
information.
Yes.
Councillor Carbone was next, and then Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just Atonic Gardens. So I've just learnt that it's a park like any other park we have in Burnside. Whenever I drive past it, there seems to be a fence around it and so forth. Do people know that it's a park? Like, do people go there and have picnics and kick a football? Or do we need to do a bit of awareness and say that?
I think, can I just say that I think we're getting a long way away from the
We were a long
and I
way
would really like to get this lease resolved. And so unless anyone really has something that adds to the debate about the lease, rather than providing lots of information, both sometimes accurate, sometimes inaccurate, sometimes emotional and sometimes not. So can we just move forward and focus on the lease? Now, councillor Levin, do you still wish to speak, or can we move on to a vote?
No, I'd like to speak.
All right, no, you can only ask a question.
No, she can speak if she
I'm
moves.
sorry, I apologise.
She can sum up, so she got to speak twice.
Okay,
Tactics.
So the
yes.
first thing I'd like to say
Oh,
is,
yes, I was going to go back to the person who moved the motion.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you.
I was going to ask a question about Atunga Gardens, but I take your point.
Right.
I was going to ask how much it cost for us to fix the wall, because when the Burnside Hospital was in charge of the wall, they didn't bother, and it cost us over $70,000.
This is part of your 5 minutes.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, all you people that have sat on the board. Somehow there must have been something in the cups of tea that they gave you. That's all I can say.
It's good sandwiches.
But all these positive questions have come from the excellent catering that hospital has given you when you're a member of the board. I take you to page 56. Public land. 3 people said this in the consultation. Hospital no longer serves the local community business, local community. Business is encroached on community land. Too much land already occupied. This is a hospital for private patients and several for-profit activities. I totally agree with that. They are for-profit. I'll finish with a question, if you can possibly answer it. In terms of this lease, is there a clause in here that the hospital isn't to sublease to anyone else? I don't want to hear it from you, Henry. I want to hear it from administration. Thank you very much.
Through there, we have Mr. Kent.
The lease that was approved by council previously, which is consistent with this lease, is consistent with what we're approving now.
Yes.
Okay. They are allowed to sublease contracting rooms to contractors in terms of their business needs. So they are permitted to do that within that lease.
So I have another question. Do we know how much they charge? It's irrelevant. Yes, it's not irrelevant.
Through Madam Mayor,
No.
short answer is no.
So they actually get, this lease is actually given to the hospital. It is a private hospital for private patients that sublease to doctors that drive Maseratis, and we give them less. We lease this. The lease, the money that we get for this lease is 10% of the commercial rates. They could make that all back by charging that to the Maserati driving doctors. So that's the first point I'd make. The second point I'd make is, and on top of that, we give them a 75% rate reduction every year. And I'm told by some of these people that have been on the board, the hospital really needs every penny it can get. Well, if it's sailing that close to the edge, all I can say is we all should be shaking in our shoes. But nonetheless, let's pass it.
Right, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right, I'm going to suggest that we have a break. I need someone to move to, we have a break now. Councillor Davey, seconded Councillor Cornish. 10-minute break. It's 9 o'clock now. We'll resume. Sorry, all those in favour? I saw lots of heads of people getting up, so I assumed it, but I shouldn't have taken that run. We will resume at 9:10. What? Strategic plan. Right, councillor Davey, strategic plan. It's your motion.
Thank you,
Withdrew it. Right?
That'd do my civic duty.
Yes.
Yeah,
Rejoin the
even though it's
table.
made by sandwiches and glasses of champagne here.
I wish to move the following, that council adopt the City of Burnside Strategic Community Plan 2020 to 2030, known as Burnside 2030, in accordance with section 122 of the Local Government Act, 1, and 2, that the following, that council restore the following environmental priority at Healthy Habits 2.4 to become Healthy Habits and Biodiversity, maintain and enhance biodiversity values throughout the city, so together we preserve and enhance our flora and fauna. So what I'm doing is restoring what has been removed. Do I actually need to write what pages that needs to go back on? Thanks. So it's on the plan on page 6 of the strategic plan, and in the text on page 12 under environment. So the strategic plan, as we know, has been developed over the last 18 months with considerable effort by the administration and 4 or 5 phases of community consultation and much work by elected members. We reviewed the final draft of the Burnside 2030 at the council meeting on the 9th of June, and this draft was agreed and circulated for final community consultation, which was undertaken between 6th of July and the 31st of July 2020. So it only finished a few weeks ago. The final results of this community feedback, which was really heartening, resulted in 157 valid responses in all. And there's been, in all of this, considerable community interest across the whole process, with, in all, I believe, 2,348 responses from all the consultation phases. As the community engagement results show on page 159, feedback there was really key, and I'm especially focusing on environmental matters, supported the environmental theme, where the respondents sought more protection for private trees, green infrastructure. Respondents also sought more public realm tree plantings, the creation of urban corridors, and protection for canopy cover. So essentially what I'm restoring is the actual piece that calls up the environment and biodiversity relating to wildlife habitat. So as you can see on page 12, priority 2.4, which we approved in the June meeting, has been removed since then. I don't understand why, but I think it's been subsumed into, or I believe it's been subsumed into a general environmental coverage. But I think from the volumes of feedback we've received and the fact that we actually have an emphasis from our public on healthy habitats and the need for our flora and fauna to be protected, that we should reinstate 2.4. So that under the environment theme, we now have the 4 priorities. Under community, we'll have 5. And under principles, under community, we've also got 5. So it means we've just got a greater emphasis to give to our community and to our administration for the value of healthy habitats and the value we place on them, so that we actually resource them and make sure we put in these corridors that we need for wildlife and the plantings we need to support our bird life. So I just, in summary, don't think that the removal of healthy habitats is justified at the last moment. And so I ask you to support this as the way forward to finally rubber stamp the long work that's been done on the strategic plan. Thank you.
Have a seconder, please. Councillor Davis.
I'm happy for Councillor Chambers.
Also, there were three of you almost simultaneously, but I think
Well, I'll
you're
steal
slightly
it.
ahead.
I think it's an excellent motion by Councillor Davey. And I think that looking at page 152, we have those three priorities looking at it. And I think in terms of the environment, I think the addition to priority 2.4 is well warranted. So 2.1 is about climate change, and I think rightly so, that's our primary, that science is settled, and I think everyone in the City of Burnside can agree on that, especially around here tonight. Canopy cover and greening in our open space. So that's about, our facilities that are open, like our current existing, say, Hazelwood Park or Kinsey Gardens Reserve, and those important things in that open space. And our waste minimisation. But what is missing there, I suppose, is bringing that, those natural environments to our city and considering what we can do to encourage our native flora and fauna to live in our city. And I think that that's something Councillor Bills actually in the last council was always was hot on, in terms of looking at trees that would support native wildlife and looking at trees that produce food for koalas and also different animals that live here. So to my mind, we need to have that balance between our current use and our human use of our environment, but I also think we need to have a focus on encouraging and protecting our native wildlife and our native habitats. So I thank very much Councillor Davey for her proposed amendment, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, and I hope that you support it.
Councillor Turnbull.
Actually, I was trying to mine. Thank you, Mayor. My summation is probably the same as Councillor Davis's. By having priorities 2.1, 2.2, we're emphasising climate change awareness, canopy cover and open space, but doesn't necessarily focus on protecting and maintaining wildlife and bird life. See, having good canopy and open spaces doesn't necessarily assist the survival of our wildlife. It helps, but we need to be more proactive, have a proactive response. Hence, I believe priority 2.4, healthy habitats and environment, has sufficient merit to stand alone. It requires a situation to be created and controlled. For example, nesting boxes in Hazelwood Park. Number 2, plantings for a koala corridor. It has to be done, not actually just there. So it's more about just preserving trees and canopies. So I strongly support this change and think it's excellent.
Councillor Lemon.
No, it wasn't me. Sorry, it wasn't me.
I actually didn't see your arm. I saw those two, but I didn't. Okay, Councillor Henschke then.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to say, yes, I support this, and I wanted to add that having this in our strategic plan could mean things like what some residents have said to me is that they don't like the idea of steel fences, when we develop properties. Because they have noticed koalas walking along the edges of steel, what are they called? Friendly neighbour fences. Well, not so friendly for koalas, because the koalas can actually climb over these friendly neighbourhood fences. They need some other type of fence. One resident said, well, brush fences, okay, that's got issues of its own. But the point being is that koalas cannot climb the neighbour-friendly fences, and if we having this strategy in place as a theme means that we can perhaps have some say over what type of fencing we have in our city, especially in areas where there are koala populations and corridors of such. So that's I just wanted to get that across to the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Piggott.
I thought Councillor Davies said she wasn't sure why it had been taken out. I thought it was fairly clear in the report why it had been taken out, and I do feel, in terms of the consultation, I think that was a reasonable thing to do. I won't go to sword on it, it's not a problem to put it back in either. Although perhaps listening to Councillor Henschke talking about fences and stuff, that's not really the point. I don't think that it's after it. It's purely is about the green space and and provide habitat. So, but I do think I'm happy to support the motion, but I just did like to make the point that I did feel it stacked up in the report. And the other thing I wanted to say, which was, and it was good to see the level that the administration's gone in regard to consultation, because I felt the point about using the word envy was a really good point. And it was good that that has been acted upon. I've been critical here this year, I think, where we haven't actually gone too much into detail of what people told us. But I don't feel that is the case. So I congratulate staff on that. I am happy to support that.
Sorry. Councillor Cornish, next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I probably wasn't going to support the motion when I first read it by email, but a little further investigation, I tend to agree, although I generally don't like to go against input from community consultation and what the community desire. I just don't think that the original intent of 2.4 is being properly incorporated in 2.1 or 2.2. And as such, I think it does need to remain and as a standalone. So as such, I will be supporting the motion.
Councillor Dawes.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I just want to, first of all, thank Belinda and the staff for taking us through the process. I've been through many strategic plans in my lifetime, and it is very, very difficult to get people to think laterally and, 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead. So I just want to acknowledge what Belinda has done for us there. I've even become used to place as a theme. I've kind of, when I saw place there, first of all, I think Councillor Lemon might have mentioned that in the previous time, but I didn't quite think that was the right term, but now I've got used to it, a bit like heads up and all those fancy terms that come up over the years. But where I sit, I think it's a very good plan. People say there are too many motherhood, fatherhood type statements in there, but I think that's what we're looking ahead. We're seeing what are the main issues for us, and so I'm quite pleased with the end result. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Just before I return to Councillor Davey, I just want to take the opportunity to also thank all the staff who are involved in the whole process and for all the elected members for their contribution to the process. I mean, in the 8 years that I was on council before, we only revitalised the previous plan. And what we've done here successfully is create a whole new one and a whole new vision. And I thank everybody involved, community and the staff and the elected members for their input into this. And thank you for the additional comments, Councillor Davey, reinforcing something that might have been lost, although implied. So over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I thank everyone for their comments. The strategic plan Burnside 2030 is a great achievement. It's a very good document and blueprint for us to move forward for the next 10 years. And it's very pleasing to see there's been so much involvement of our community. The theme of the environment was the one that was given the most focus and comment. While the others are all very important, and especially place, as Councillor Dawes has said, if the environment is what sustains our wonderful area and our lifestyle and what counts, so as well as our character. And the reason I included the healthy habits and biodiversity as a standalone section is because it does need its own emphasis, I believe, to stand out in the whole huge environment matter. So hopefully you'll support this, and thank you again to the staff for all their work.
Thank you. Those in favour? Carried. I'm going to say unanimously. I think this one needs to be. I think this one needs to be. Item 14. There's nothing there. We're going to come back to your. Sorry.
I'd like to make some comments about the regional at the work we got from the Regional Alliance era.
I haven't got to that yet.
Yeah,
okay. I'm just going to say that there's nothing there from 14.1 to 3. The era water, we've got something to discuss later on. So now, era Regional Alliance, you wish to make a comment on something in the report?
I wish to make
Councillor Lemon,
I just
and then Councillor Davey.
wish to make a couple of comments about this. First of all, this is an excellent document, and those of you that haven't had a chance to read it thoroughly, I absolutely commend it to. But having said that, I would actually seek you to go to page 238. And if you look at page 238, the last paragraph under submission into draft phase 3 of the planning and design code, what you'll see there is they make a point of talking about the anomaly with the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide calling for a 20% increase in canopy cover, and yet there is huge urban infill that actually is immediately makes that difficult. The contribution to a deputy study on the impact of urban infill on trees is something that's coming to us soon. They've done a canopy cover changes for Campbelltown, Unley and Marion, so I'll look forward to getting that at some stage. On the following page, 239, the letter to the Planning Commission from the ERA CEOs, looking at things like requiring minimum 1 tree per dwelling, maintaining the existing 7% deep soil area, and a variety of other those dot points right at the top of the page. And then underneath that, they actually make the point that the draft code around protecting significant and regulated trees is silent. So they've also talked about that. We need to keep that front of mind, that the draft code is silent on the protection of regulated and significant trees. So just 238 and 239 alone really shows that there's been a lot of work done. And then I take you to page 243, where you look at the 5 key projects for 2020 and 2021. And number 1 of the 5 key projects is work with Green Adelaide and develop a greening program for private land, which I think is sensational. So ERA, our CEO group, are actually going to be using that as their priority 1, and we'll be getting a report back from them, or we will be keeping our eye out, no doubt. Our CEO will be bringing back this information to this council. So I was utterly delighted when I read both these reports. They're both excellent. The Resilient East, as well as the other one, which I forgot what it's called, also resilient, our region, Grow East. Both really, and Grow East has got some fantastic statistics in it. So I just wanted to draw members' attention to that. If you hadn't read it as thoroughly as I did, and I did it today. So I commend these. I commend them both to you.
Can I have a seconder? Oh, no, we don't need a seconder on that one. Do we?
Receive it, yes.
Oh, we do. You have to have a, so you're moving to receive it? Councillor Hubel to second it? Those in favour? Sorry,
Hold on,
Councillor Connor.
I had my hand up before.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have you. Yeah, okay, apologies.
That's all right. I don't care. I just need to ask a couple of questions and agree and concur with the comments from Councillor Lemon about.
I thought we'd moved to motion, but I didn't see Councillor Davey. Did you see her hand up before?
Yeah, she
Yes.
specifically said.
Did have her hand up
She
to
was-
ask questions prior to the seconding.
But that doesn't matter.
Councillor Lemon said, asked her not to bring her up. She was so keen to ask her questions. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
and then.
Oh, no, you-
Thank you.
No, okay, go back.
Councillor Lemon drew attention to the 5 key projects, which are very admirable. And on one of those, I'd like to commend the our CEO, because I'm not sure what influence he had with greening private land with the land that I've already had compliments on in front of the Burnside village that hasn't been built on, which is a glorious green, like a bowling green. And everybody thinks it's wonderful. They'd like a few trees popped in there as well.
Maybe a giant gum tree.
So if I may, Madam Mayor, I would love to take credit. And I know Councillor Davey didn't ask me initially to be approached for grass. but before I had an opportunity, the grass appeared.
Was there on you?
So
Great
the
master.
credit must go to the cars.
If we write to them and offer them some free trees.
Might build
That would be a good idea.
It's a future development site.
I know. I've already had people ask me when they can start playing sport on it.
Yes.
That was one group, and another group asked me when they could have picnics. I said in summer might be a bit hot, but anyway, it's another issue.
My other question is for the ERA group. We talk about here waste management and recycling and all of those things. But it always seems to go back to East Waste to provide advice and comments. I'm not sure if this is the right forum. My question relates to, can we do something on waste minimisation, which is the stage before we generate waste, and it's actually about education and promotion which is probably counter to East Waste's bailiwick. I don't know if they do any work on it. So that we're actually educating the community, looking at initiatives to minimise waste before it gets into that stream.
Through Madam Mayor, I'm pleased, two things. I'm pleased to say that East Waste are actually very proactive in that space about waste minimisation. So they're not actually encourage us to generate more waste to support the business model. But the 6 councils are actively looking at other ways of minimising waste. One of the ways I can't speak about publicly this evening, but the other one thing we're looking at is potentially working with Detmol, doing a trial with Burnside Village about waste minimisation. So we are actively looking at other ways outside of East Waste to take differentiated approaches to waste minimisation.
I think there was a good feature article in the Advertiser earlier on the weekend also about waste and pointing out the cost to the communities through councils having to pay for people putting the wrong stuff in the wrong bins.
Oh, yes.
And there was quite a lot of feedback on the media in terms of people relating or responding to those concerns as well.
My final question, I've still got another one, and I don't know if ERA is considering it or can, is single-use plastics and phasing out, and because I mean, I think the state government's got a policy of phasing out single-use plastics that's been disturbed a bit by the coronavirus. Is there some work that ERA, the Alliance, could do to start leadership in that area, even if it's just procurement in their own councils and education?
I think it's fair to say it is on all of our agendas in the use councils. I think, as you said correctly, COVID's kind of thrown a spanner in that work. But I think going forward, you'll see more activity in that space.
All right. I did get some information today about Brown Hill Creek. A number of months ago, there was a plan to have a Zoom meeting to inform people more. This was about 4 months ago. I initiated this on behalf of the 5 mayors who are involved in Brown Hill Creek. It took us along till this week to get a response, and then they tried to set up a meeting that was going to be face-to-face with only 20 people participating. So I got back to them and said, no, that's not what was asked for. They are going to be running, and you'll be informed of this one, two sessions next week that will be open to all elected members of all 5 councils. One's a daytime session at 10 o'clock on Monday morning, and I replied and said that a lot of our people work full-time. That's not very going to be suitable for them. I have suggested the other night might be a Wednesday night after 7, so I haven't had confirmation about that yet, but certainly people, they have responded to me and said that they'll look into that as an option. So people can actually ask questions. There'll be a presentation by the person who's in charge of the project and an opportunity for elected members from all 5 councils to ask questions, because so many across all 5 councils have not had a great deal of background, but at least we got the information that came to us in the last council meeting, which was a good start. But prior to that, I mean, I'd been asking for this meeting like for 3 or 4 months, and but I'm glad we got that at least, so that did inform people a bit more. That's just an update. Mayor's report, someone like to move?
I had a question.
Yes, certainly.
I'm keen to hear about the meeting regarding the CEO, Councillor Henschke, and a student being mentored through the University of Business School.
Yes.
Just wanted to hear more about that. Is that a new initiative we could potentially provide or do that more with the business school, or is that?
It's the second year that Councillor Henschke has mentored a student from the University of South Australia Business School. On each occasion, she has just brought that person in to meet with us and talk about the relationship between councils and universities and providing opportunities. And I also shared with the CEO just yesterday an initiative that Mitcham Council have with the Flinders University in terms of looking at potential links between the universities. So it was really just a social informal chat to hear about the experience from the person who's being mentored and we both learned a little bit more about the course that she was involved in that final year.
And how long was the meeting going to go for?
35, 40 minutes. And I think you also met with Mr. Cooper afterwards.
Oh, okay. And how long was Mr. Cooper engaged in mentoring those?
No, not mentoring. We just met with them for that 40 minutes.
Okay. Is that something that
we didn't do any mentoring.
Okay, and I just wanted to, I'm just interested, so that's something that the university will deal with, like the administration staff to set up with their students, or is that really? This is initiated through the university seeking mentors for their graduates or working with graduates.
Yes, I think it's linking up alumni.
Yes.
Sorry?
It's links up alumni with students nearing the end of their careers or postgrad studies.
In their field of study.
Cool. Is that something that maybe if the CEO is, keen to meet with more students that, because I understand like Councillor Henschke, has a particular relationship with that one student. Maybe we could do it as more of a, get more bang for buck out of our time there, where the CEO could perhaps extend to meet with a group of students that come through at a time from that business school, perhaps. Or I'm just wondering, I think it's great, but maybe we can use that time, more effectively. There's been a lot of concerns about, say, staff time and all that. I think it's really something we can do. Maybe we could do that.
I'll let Councillor Henschke explain how it was initiated.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Davis. I'll perhaps just give you a bit more information. The reason why one of the reasons why this meet and greet was set up was that the mentee I have this year is in fact a City of Burnside business owner, and I one of the goals is to network, and I wanted to help her raise awareness with her regards with Propel SA, which she wasn't aware of. So she learnt about Propel SA, and she connected with the general manager regarding that, and that was pretty much the one of the outcomes.
Right.
Okay, so
I guess I'm more concerned now.
No, not concerned at all. It's just a social getting together, not leading in any particular direction. If we wanted to, that would have to be up to the operations of the council to make that determination.
I guess I'm just wary of the cost of the council staff in terms of the council, a lot of councillors here are very cognizant of the staff time involved in it and the benefit that we have. And I'm just cautious of the amount.
It's not an issue of time. I meet with all sorts of people, and so does the CEO, from all walks of life and through all different organisations.
It's just that relationship that I think I have potentially. I did before. I think we should open it up so it's not just mentees of Councillor Henschke, but potentially that entire sector, rather than, because it is a bit strange for a council business owner to be a mentee. That's, I suppose, the thing. So what I would suggest maybe is that we could offer this to the whole. Not just one student that Councillor Henschke has a particular
If any of you were approached to be a mentor or were involved in any community organisation, and you asked to meet with the CEO or myself or both of us, and it meant that also would be potentially an introduction to Mr. Cooper or Mr. Cantor, our leadership team, in relation to the way council works. I think these are really important opportunities that need to be supported within our.
I think we can open that up, I think. We can,
Well, if, like I
you know,
said,
allow that for more.
anyone who's approached who wishes to can do so. Yes, councillor Lemon and then Carbone.
Yes, I'm just interested in, I have a question about one of your dot points. You had a Zoom meeting with Dahlia and Pangallo and Parnell,
Yes,
but you don't say what it was about.
the upper house, through the LGA organised it.
Yep.
And it was an opportunity for them to each speak. There was also supposed to be members of the opposition, but they were unable to appear on the night. And so those three people gave their points of view about local government reform.
So was that exclusive just to mayors?
Yes.
It's a shame, wouldn't have mattered.
Mayors, it was only an invitation through the LGA to all mayors, not even the CEOs were invited. Were you? Was you invited as well? Sorry, it was the mayors and CEOs across the state.
Through Madam Mayor, I think you'll find in my TGIF, I think I mentioned about that meeting, the fact that the crossbenchers in broad terms aren't supporting the rate capping proposal.
What, all of them?
Two of them have flatly,
Refused, and the third is,
the third is
fine,
saying he
he will.
supports rate capping, but not that format.
Okay.
That Darwin.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, that's public knowledge. But I think rate capping has done its own deal anyway in relation with COVID anyway, so for now. Anything else? Sorry, councillor Carbone.
I was going to ask
Same
about the exact
question?
same dot point, so.
Okay. Councillor Turnbull?
I was going to ask about the next dot point. Was there any decision made about the overall funding for Eastwood Community Centre?
Oh, it wasn't a decision, no discussion about that at all. Well, there was, all it was actually a meet and greet with the CEO. He had not visited the centre before and didn't know how the place functioned. And so it was an opportunity for Sue Ross, the manager, to show him around and to meet most of the board members and also to see the centre actually in operation. So there were a group of children there, there were a group of adults there involved in activities. So there was no decision making at all, no discussion at all about business, purely about this is what we do here and an opportunity for us to see the place operating. And made us both feel how lucky we were, quite honestly, with the way they work so well with disabled and disadvantaged adults and children. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
While we're at it. I see you there, gradually resume your engagements.
Oh, well, that's just been their common.
With, yeah, Kevin, I'm just a bit curious, is there much that you're having to decline or turn down at the moment?
At this point in time, I've not said no to anything since the beginning of August. I said that I was not available until August. So up until that point in time, I was consistent with not accepting invitations from any other council or any other, formal
Move that the motion be
invitations.
put.
But since August, I've.
Formal motion, I move that the motion be put,
Yes,
please.
yes, fine. Seconded by
Anyone?
councillor Davey. All those in favour? Carried. I'm very happy
Well,
with
now we're going to, now we've got to
Say
put the motion.
anybody, put the motion. I didn't put the motion.
No, that's the formal motion.
You didn't call for those
Oh,
against, there was no.
It was a procedural that people.
Yes.
You weren't- you
Procedure
didn't-
had to be put, now I put the motion.
No, you didn't call for those against the motion, you only called for those in favour.
Sorry, those against, and hopefully no one's going to call it division.
You can't run a formal motion.
And I can't, all right,
What a
and
good
now the
suggestion.
motion. Those in favour.
Accepting the mayor's report.
Accepting the report.
Who proposed said motion?
It was Sarah.
Alright,
She's
Harry,
not-
can I just say, if you've ever got any questions when you read the mayor's report, give me a ring and say, what was that about? I try to minimise the information that's in there, but I'm very happy to expand on it, and I'll be very happy to receive any phone call from you or an email to say, what did you meet about, what was it all about? Okay, I'm very happy to answer those questions.
You have to tease.
Otherwise, I try to minimise your reading, you've got nothing to do. Okay. They just, reports seem to just get longer every. Now I'm moving to reports from members. If there's anyone else who wishes to add anything in relation to what they've been doing, representing their community, please pass it on to Rob. We have received a number of correspondence from named in 1723. Ask someone to move and accept those, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Carried. Other business? Yes, Councillor Hughes?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say in the chamber tonight that I received an email, so did Councillor Cornish and other residents regarding the Wombat crossing, just concerns regarding the safety of it, and the residents raised our awareness of the Rose Park Primary School, who have published in their newsletter for parents. There are a number of children are doing this, playing this ring the doorbell and run kind of thing, racing down Gurney Road and running across the Wombat crossing, and it sounds like they're quite concerned that the crossing may not be safe for these, these children are not behaving properly anyway to start.
Well, let's get up to CCTV.
The point here is just wanted to
Yeah.
We
can call
Just let her make a point.
that we have received correspondence, and yes, we are working with a member of the Dunstan and the council administration to implement additional measures to improve traffic calming in the area for general street calming, and all the correspondence has been.
It's good for us all to be aware that something like that's been published in a school newsletter. Because that goes beyond just Rose Park.
That is not other business.
Okay.
No, that's not, sorry, that's not other business.
All right.
Imagine we walked-
That is the end of the formal part of the meeting. Now we need to move into confidence. Councillor Cornish are always very good at doing that.
Do you want me to read it?
No, I think we'll accept it as read.
And I'll second it.
And Councillor Davis seconded, thank you. All those in favour? Carried.